This chapter is called Papa Dropped a Bomb. In the hot summer days of 1921, I had long thoughts about the school year just passed and wondered what was ahead in the coming year. Verda and Grant had just finished high school. Grant is our cousin. Had just finished the 9th grade, which that year had been added to the elementary schools. They would be added to our group of cousins with Auntie and Logan. All of this would go through my mind as I hacked my way up the beet rows in the hot June sun. 2 hacks, leave a beet. 2 hacks, leave a beet. Never leave a double. Don't try to cut out that extra beet with your hoe, or you will cut out both beets. Use your left hand. No, you can't wear gloves. It wouldn't work. From there, we would go to some kitchen to help the farmer's wife cook for the hares or the threshers and earn $1 a day. Little as it was, it would help us get into school. One day, Papa came in, sat down on the couch and said, "Now that there are the 2 of you ready to go away to school, I'm not going to have the money to send you to school in Logan. You may even not be able to go to school at all." I'm sure my heart stopped beating. And then he continued, we may be able to look into one of the country schools where tuition is only $15 a year, and every student not en route to the interurban rail system is paid 40 cents a day toward board and room. This was disappointing news for me. I had made friends, become enamored with the city, the campus, the school, and its teachers, and a good home away from home with members of the family. I could hardly face the idea that life was now at an end, that life was now at an end. There was only one thing worse than that, not to go to school at all. I had the feeling that it was not Papa's intention to deny us a high school education. He had been through that in his own life. We would just look hard at the alternatives, the county high schools, with low tuition and either free transportation or a small cash stipend toward board and room. There were 2 county high schools, a north and a south cache. The north school was only 10 miles east as the crow flies, and the south was about 30 miles away in the southeast corner of the valley. There were those who had automobiles, but the roads were neither graded, graveled, or hard surfaced. School buses were 3 years away, as was a car for our family. This left the steam train branch line that connected with the through trains at Cass Junction just across the river, 2 miles away from Newton. It would mean no weekends at home, only for holidays, no Aunt Caroline, no cousins. Verda and I would be alone in a strange town and in a new school. I was 16 and she was 15. During all this turmoil, discussions, and decisions, I knew we needed some help. I decided to fast for 1 meal every day for 1 week in August and pray for help to get to school. I knew I had to do this in secret. It was not easy, since we all sat down together for every meal, but I managed it. This would be repeated every August for the next 3 years, as we constantly faced the same difficulties. Our prayers were answered, and coupled with our own efforts, we finished high school. In the midst of all this turmoil at our home, we had another problem. As news spread that the Dowdle girls were going to Hyrum all alone, there was an outcry, beginning with the aunts and the uncles and going clear to the Bishop of the Ward. "Mary," that's my mother, "Mary, what are you thinking of isn't Caroline going to Logan this year? Brother Dowdle, do you think it's wise to?" And on and on. Our parents knew they were taking risks. They also knew the greater risk if they kept us out of high school for even 1 year. And so we went ahead with plans and preparations. One Sunday, late August, Mama answered a knock at the door. "My name is N.W. Christensen, and this is YY Lucy. We are here to see if you have students that might be planning to attend South Cache High School next year." Mama and Papa poured out their whole story. As usual, we were not invited into the conversation until it was nearly over, but in time to hear Mr. Christensen say, "Now, Brother and Sister Dowdle, you have nothing to fear. Your daughters will be safe and will be well cared for. We will see for that. They will enjoy the school and the people in the ward. I teach music at the school, and I direct the ward choir, and I am now inviting them to join the choir. In fact, we have a spare room in our home, and we'll be glad to rent it to them. We are just a few doors from the church and a couple of blocks from the school." The cloud was lifted. Everything looked up. Mama and Papa planned a trip to Hyrum the next week. After a long, exhausting day, they returned to tell us they had rented a room at the Ira Williams home, directly across the street from the Third Ward Church. They had bought and installed a little monkey stove from a man Papa knew, a steel couch that opened up to form a double bed. Mrs. Williams had put in a small cupboard, a washstand, and table and chairs, and we were set to go. Papa moved us to Hyrum in the white-top buggy. I've called this little topic within the chapter, "Can any good come out of Nazareth?" Mama stayed for a few days to get us settled and to do a little cooking. She went home on the train. I cried every time I heard the whistle of that train. I was homesick. I just couldn't believe that campus. All classes for all students except the shop classes were held in that one building, which reminded me of a matchbox set on its side. A seminary building was under construction nearby. Those buildings, set on top of a rocky hill, were out across Salt Hollow, as it was called, since no crops would grow there. That was the campus, sans grass, sans trees or shrubs, sans everything. And I thought, can any good come out of Nazareth? One Sunday afternoon, we had a visitor at our apartment. He said his name was Sylvan Anderson, and he was a nephew of Mrs. Williams, and that he was in several of my classes. And he said he just wanted to drop by to get better acquainted. During the week following, he nominated me to be class representative on the Clarion staff, the school news sheet. Trivial though it was the key that unlocked the door to our future in that school and way beyond. Suddenly, we had friends, good friends. The teachers suddenly became wonderful. School life became exciting. Most of our friends were from neighboring towns, Wellsville, Providence, Millville, and Minden. We were often invited to their homes for weekends, for their parents became our good friends. Mr. Bates, my history teacher, asked both Verda and I if we would be interested in a debating program. Verda debated an inter-school debate that first year, and I joined the school team. We both joined the chorus line of a light opera directed by Mr. Christensen. The MIA of the state had a field day every year where members gave speeches and songs, declamations, instrumental music, crafts, and sports. Some were inter-ward contests. The Third Ward asked me to represent them in the declamation demonstration, which would not be judged. I was to memorize the story of the Message to Garcia by Elbert Hubbard, which I did, every word of it. We were suddenly busy, happy, and the whole town of Newton knew it when we went home in October for a big vacation. That 2 weeks when school in the county let out to have all students help at the beet harvest. And This part is called The Good in Nazareth. N.W. Christensen. When I registered for a class in music appreciation that first day at Soft Cash, I had no idea what music appreciation even meant. I think I registered for the teacher who had called at our home in Newton in August. What it did was to make the difference in my whole life, a lot of difference. In his quiet way, Mr. Christensen taught us about the great composers of the world and their music, and some of the famous people who performed the music. To this day, I remember when he introduced us to the three violinists, Joshua Heifetz, Misha Elman, and Fritz Kreisler. These are the greatest violinists in the world, he said. And somewhere along the way, he talked about William Primrose, a great violinist, or he may have talked about the famous London String Quartet, to which both Mr. Heifetz and Mr. Primrose belonged. Imagine my surprise when Mr. Primrose came to the campus of Brigham Young University in Provo just a few years ago at the invitation of Dr. Dalton, who had been his pupil. He was suffering from terminal cancer, and Mr. Dalton felt it would be a good place to be, where he could live his life at his own pace and do some teaching as well. Our Mark was working as a producer-director at KBYU and made a documentary film about the life of Mr. Primrose. At its showing and at a gathering of violists from all across the country, Mr. Primrose was applauded, took a bow, and then he walked clear across the room to where Mark and I sat. He pulled Mark to his feet, put his arm around him, and said to the audience, "Here is my Cecil DeMille, my Francis Cappello, my Frank Capra. Here, a fine compliment." I was again surprised to read of the death of Joshua Heifetz. It may have been in 1988. I thought they were all old men in 1921. Mr. Christensen taught us about grand opera, its composers, its performers, and the stories. And our text was the Victrola Book of the Opera. The school had a new Victrola, as it was then called. It might just be that the company placed the machines and some records in the schools for advertising and education. I would not be sure. Mr. Christensen told us that the machines and the records were available to us in the ag room downstairs any time the class was not in session. I was there in that room night after night, completely caught up in that music, down in the ag room, ugly room. I didn't understand the word they were singing, but I understood the emotions, and I knew the plot, and I learned to identify every aria. My taste was being developed for better music than I had been accustomed to. Mr. Christensen had a choir at the school, and they often sang choruses from the oratorios, and once again I was moved by that beautiful sound. I remember this good man with fondness and with gratitude for the lasting impressions and the richness of my life. He was a quiet man and soft-spoken, and I never remember him raising his voice to control noisy high school students, but he had perfect control and respect. I was sorry to hear that he left the high school to fulfill a mission to a little church school in North Texas, and when he returned, he settled in a lovely home on the boulevard in Logan. After Ted and I had met and were engaged, he told me that he had met N.W. Christensen at a district conference when he was on a mission in Texas, and they had written together to that conference. One Sunday, we both called on him, and as we left, Mr. Christensen said, "I think this will be a marriage made in heaven."